As professional songwriters and teachers of songwriting in universities and colleges, Benny and I have collectively read probably hundreds of books on songwriting and creative practice. And what we want to do in this video is really talk about 5 of the most influential, transformative and impactful books that we keep coming back to as songwriters, as well as the books that we recommend most to our students.
And some of these books might surprise you, because if you were to Google songwriting books, some of these aren't going to show up. And yet they have been deeply influential and transformative for both Keppie and I on our songwriting journeys.
So our goal in this video is really to give you an overview of these books, tell you why they are so impactful on us, and also to give you some of the key takeaways and concepts that will hopefully be helpful right now. But of course, the real benefit is going to come from actually picking up these books and diving into them yourself.
Number 1, Art and Fear. Observations on the perils and rewards of art making.
This is a book written by David Bales and Ted Orland, who are art makers and art practitioners, as well as art teachers. And this is a book written not specifically for songwriters, but for anyone engaged in the art making process. What I love about the very introduction of this book is they say this is a book for ordinary people making art. It's not about geniuses. It's not about the Mozarts of the world. It's about the rest of us who are deeply entrenched in the daily work and the daily toil of art making. What I love about this book is it's really written for people who are looking to build and sustain a life of creativity and creative art making, and particularly when those people are not embedded in a culture or an institution that inherently values the art making process. So they're talking about people who are not in college, who are not in university, who are simply makers of art out in the world.
And the real question they address in this book is, how do you maintain focus? How do you maintain motivation? How do you maintain discipline and self-worth and a sense of value as you continue to build your body of work? In short, how do you keep going when it gets hard? And one of the most important takeaways in this book is focusing on the process, not the outcome.
To all viewers but yourself, what matters is the product, the finished artwork. To you and you alone, what matters is the process, the experience of shaping that artwork. The viewer's concerns are not your concerns, although it's dangerously easy to adopt their attitudes. Their job is whatever it is, to be moved by art, to be entertained by it, to make a killing off it, whatever. Your job is to learn to work on your work. Book number 2, Songwriters on Songwriting by Paul Zollo. What is this book? This book is basically an enormous tome of interviews between Paul Zollo and just so many of the most influential songwriters of the past 50, 60, 70 years. So there's interviews in here with Bob Dylan, Pete Seeger, Carole King, Joan Baez, Paul Simon, Janis Ian, David Byrne, Tom Petty, Susan Vega, Katie Lang, Madonna, Lou Reed.
And what is so compelling about reading this collection of interviews with these famous songwriters is just how many different processes there are, just how many different ways there are to write songs. And this is really kind of an amazing thing as a songwriter to read, because we all have our own style and we all have our own way of doing it. When you hear these other songwriters talk about it, some of them have completely opposite processes, and that in a way gives us permission to really lean into our own songwriting process, to understand there's not a right or a wrong way to write songs. And it also gives us some things we can try and experiment with that have been shown by these other artists to have worked.
There's part of the interview with Paul Simon where he talks about how he kind of doesn't focus too much on the meaning of a song. So he talks about really trying to express an idea or tell a story, then adding a consecutive thought and a consecutive thought. He talks about the ways he's more concerned with giving a song direction rather than giving meaning. Now, by way of complete contrast, the interview with Jimmy Webb talks about how he really likes to start with the title. He really likes to have a clear concept, a clear direction from the beginning, and everything else really springs from the nexus point of that title.
And one of the real joys of reading this book is that Paul Zollo himself is a songwriter. He's not just an interviewer. And so when he's asking these questions of these famous songwriters, he's asking it through the lens of someone who really gets the technical craft of songwriting. It's hard to think of someone else who has had more experience or has done more of this kind of work, because he's written this one, he's written the second volume. He is the guy who has spent more time researching songwriting processes than anyone else.
And because he has spoken to so many songwriters, his capacity to synthesize and comment on the songwriting process is really unique.
Despite the impact of songwriters such as Dylan and Lennon and McCartney, who forever expanded the potential of the popular song, the song form itself was never exploded and replaced. Dylan, the Beatles, Simon, and the rest showed great respect for the song, and within its narrow confines created miracles. And it is in that accomplishment, creating something eternal and unlimited within a restricted form, that the full and true phenomenon of the song is realized. Number 3. How to Write One Song by Jeff Tweedy. Jeff Tweedy is the lead singer and songwriter for the alt-rock genre-defying band Wilco, and they are generally adored by their fans for their unconventional approach to songwriting and music making.
Some artists and songwriters are incredible at what they do, but not very skilled at actually talking about or communicating about the nuances of the craft itself. One of the joyful things about Jeff Tweedy is not only is he an incredible songwriter, but he's so thoughtful and so able to communicate the nuances and detail and philosophy behind the craft and process itself.
And he's someone who cares deeply about helping people write songs. That's what comes through more than anything else in this book. Ultimately, this book is a beautiful blend of philosophy, reflections on the creative process, and some very practical songwriting exercises and tips.
There are so many wonderful takeaways from this book, but if there's one really overarching theme that threads its way through the whole book, it's really the idea that the process of songwriting is much more rewarding and important than inspiration. When I say something like inspiration is overrated, it's not because I think you don't ever need to be inspired. What I'm trying to tell you, and what I still tell myself frequently, is that inspiration is rarely the first step. When it does come out of the blue, it's glorious, but it's much more in your own hands than the divine inspiration type beliefs we all tend to have about inspiration. Most of the time, inspiration has to be invited.
And maybe one of the reasons we love this book so much is because after writing songs for more than 20 years, this idea resonates more and more with us, that you really have to engage with the process and invite inspiration to join the party. It's not just going to happen on its own.
Number 4, Writing Better Lyrics by Pat Patterson. Let me start by saying that if you were to Google songwriting books, this will come up. This has been the #1 selling songwriting book on Amazon for, 15 or 20 years. So Pat Patterson is a professor at the Berklee College of Music. He teaches poetry. He also teaches lyric writing. He was my teacher and then my mentor and then my friend and my colleague. So I am well familiar with this material and the person behind it.
When I first encountered Pat's work, it was in a 2-day workshop, and I read this book after that 2-day workshop. What changed my life was the fact that he went into so much detail and took so much care when crafting lyrics. And he really was the first person who showed us that you could make all of these deliberate choices around how you shaped your lyrics, how you shaped your narrative. Here was someone who really cared deeply about not just what you were saying, but how you were saying it.
And that is really, I think, the gift that Pat has given the world of songwriters. And if I were to summarize the key takeaway word that encapsulates Pat's concepts, it's really the concept of prosody. And prosody is this term that describes that. It describes the relationship of meaning and structure. And really one of the most extraordinary things that Pat demonstrates through really practical examples is how the shape and form and structure of your lyric actually has an emotional impact on what you're trying to convey. And that when the meaning and the structure are actually working together, that amplifies the emotion.
One of the best ways to give your lyric extra punch is to understand how to make your lyric move and how to make that motion support what you're saying, how to create prosody. Sometimes you may accidentally trip onto this sort of writing, unaware of the choices you're making. But if you tune into your lyrics' motion consistently, you'll not only write and rewrite your songs more effectively, but more important, you won't rely on lucky accidents or divine inspiration to drop those good bits into your lap. Before we move on, it's important to note that this book is jam-packed with practical exercises and tips. One of the most powerful of these exercises, and something that we talk about a lot in our other videos, is the object writing exercise.
Object writing, or what I often call sense writing, is really a 10-minute timed writing exercise, and you can find out a lot more detail about it by clicking there. So I won't go into detail here, but really the transformative thing about this exercise is it gives songwriters something to do in 5 to 10 minutes on any day. It really trains you to write from a place of abundance, not to feel like when you sit down to write a lyric that you have to get every word right. When you do sense writing or object writing, it allows you and trains you to just create a lot of material, much of which is gold for your lyric writing. It also trains you to think and look at the world like a songwriter. It trains you to become attuned to your sensory experience. And I think one of the gifts of this exercise and the philosophy underneath it is really the idea that the most universally relatable songs and lyrics are the ones that lean in to your particular and idiosyncratic experience and perspective of the world. And sense writing or object writing is one of these exercises that develops the muscle to actually perceive and express your experiences.
And number 5, Storyworthy by Matthew Dix.
Matthew Dix is the author of multiple best-selling novels. He's also a live storyteller and has probably won the most Moth Grand Slams and Story Slams of anyone anywhere. He is just an absolute master of the craft of storytelling. And the key question that Matt is really addressing in this book, Storyworthy, is really that. It's really asking, what are the stories from our lives that are worth telling? And the answer to that question is really our lives are full of stories worth telling. It's not actually a lack of interesting or exciting things happening in your life. It's really about how to pay attention to the things that happen every day and turning those things into interesting and compelling stories. Tiny moments are the moments that connect with people, that touch people's hearts. This is not to say that the big moments can't make a great story, but it turns out even these big stories need to be more about the little moments than the big ones.
So 2 things happen when you read this book. Firstly, you get a deep exploration of what story really means. Matt takes us deep into the structures of stories, what makes for a compelling story, what's really going on when you break down the most commonly told stories. And the second thing that happens is he really gives us a lot of tools and exercises for developing lots of ideas. If you do what Matt says in this book, if you follow the exercises as we've been trying to do over the last few months, you will have an endless supply of original ideas. You'll have notebooks full of things that you can turn into your own material.
There are 3 exercises in this book that Matt describes. They are first, last, best, worst, crash and burn, but the one we really want to talk about is homework for life.
You can check out Matt's TED Talk in a link below where he goes through homework for life. But what we really found amazing about it is when you do it, it reveals to you this almost counterintuitive truth about storytelling. And that is that whilst we're often looking for the grand or epic story, the truth is the small moments in life, the ones that we note down daily, the things that almost feel mundane, those are the gold. Those are the bits that when you collect them and reflect on them and review them at the end of the week or the month, they become the things that you really find most important that you want to talk about. And those are the things you end up turning into songs because those are the things that connect with people. The small things are what we can relate to. They're the human things, not the big, grand, epic things that are unrelatable.
I think a great way to think about that is that a lot of songwriters think that you have to have experienced some massive heartbreak to write a song about heartbreak. But what Homework for Life kind of teaches you is the amount of heart that exists in the small moments. You don't need to have experienced trauma or catastrophe to actually experience heartbreak, and actually tapping into those moments and our experience and sensitivity to that stuff every day is really the work of the songwriter.
So if you're a songwriter who feels like your life is too boring to write about or there's nothing exciting going on, do Homework for Life for a month and you'll change your mind.
I have one more thing to say about Homework for Life.
Okay, because we love it.
We love it. Which is this. Homework for Life, which in essence is simply asking you to spend 2 or 3 minutes every day reflecting on a single moment from your day that made today different to any other day. When you do that reflection, it has a compounding effect. Rather than just kind of like swanning through the day and not paying attention, you start paying attention to the details of every day.
And Matt makes the point in the book that when you notice more things, when you pay attention, not only does your creative work get better, but life gets better. He really promotes this exercise as something that will improve your life, not just improve your creative process.
We were lucky enough to actually interview Matt a couple of months ago, and you can check out that interview in its full form right here.
So those are 5 books that have had a huge impact on us as songwriters. Let us know in the comments if you've read any of these and how you felt about them. And also let us know in the comments if there are other books that have had an impact on you as songwriters.
Happy writing, guys.